Hey folks, so I'm Scottish, you may or may not have noticed, and as such I absolutely love a bargain. So a slightly dodgy but boxed GTX 1070 for £160, that sounds like it's right up my street. So this is the INNO3D GTX 1070, and looking at the box, well, it looks like we're in for a very plain and simple experience. There's no funky graphics here, no gamer focused blurb with explosions, RGB Owls or red dragons or anything like that. Just 8GB, 256-bit, and GDDR5 Simple. You wouldn't even know what your card looked like by any of the box art. Simply seeing as there is none. Which makes it a bit more of a surprise when we actually take it out of the box. It's undeniably simple, but actually in a unique and pretty good way. First off, we've got no lighting. A turn off for some I'm sure, but considering this card was an entry level GTX 1070 on launch, that's not really a bad thing. What we do get is a nice sturdy backplate and a twin fan cooler, 8-pin PCIe power, 3 display ports and a single HDMI out, as well as a single DVI. Now at this point I'm sure you're thinking, a GTX 1070 for 1060 money, what's the catch? And well, there is indeed a catch. When plugged in, one of the fans is simply not spinning. It's trying for sure, but there appears to be a considerable amount of resistance. And taking the card out and checking it all by hand confirms that one fan is spinning much freer than the other. Now obviously I knew this when I bought the card. The seller on eBay was very clear that the card booted and would even install the Nvidia drivers, but when gaming it would simply overheat. And it indeed boots, and when doing nothing it stays reasonably cool. But under load it crashes pretty quickly. So let's tear it down and see if we can sort it out. Now, one of the most unique things about this INNO3D X2 card is its ingenious simplicity of its fan and shroud arrangement. I'm sure you've seen it multiple times, possibly on one of my own GPU teardown videos, where you separate out the parts and you're eventually left with a plastic shroud with fans screwed onto that. Not so with the INNO3D card. These 6 thumb screws pop off the front, and the shroud is actually just 3 separate small metal covers. It's ingeniously simple, and it's going to make cleaning the card down the line a bit of a breeze. What's left is 2 fans which are all low profile and they clip directly onto the aluminium heatsink. But other than that, this card is just like any other card, and it's also based on the reference GTX 1070 PCB, so let's strip it down fully and see what lurks underneath. Now disassembly is fairly straightforward in all honesty. Once the retention screws at the back have been loosened to separate the heatsink from the PCB, we were greeted with a very dry thermal interface material. And by very dry I mean potentially the worst I've ever seen. This stuff was absolutely solid. So much so that I had to ditch my usual 70+% isopropyl wipes in favour of elbow grease, a cotton bud and some 99% isopropyl alcohol. This does kinda make sense though, as the fan directly over the GPU was not really spinning, it's not going to be dissipating heat, which means that the TIM over time was essentially just baking onto the GPU. Stripping it back though, it was nice to see that we've got both VRM and memory cooling in the form of a metal plate with thermal pads, and when I removed everything, the pads were in good enough nick to pass. So all traces of dust were removed and the pads were reseated to ensure a perfect contact with all the components. The PCB was cleaned with electronic circuit board cleaner, and the heatsink was simply washed in the sink and left to dry overnight on a heater, as you definitely don't want any water lingering there. So a day later, and everything is at least clean, so I guess we can turn to the main item, those fans. We've got one that's not spinning freely, but at least it rotates, and the other that tries to rotate pretty hard, but it ultimately fails. Cleaning all the gunk off the fans is certainly a good start, but in all honesty, I'm pretty sure it's the bearings in the fans that's going to be the culprit here. So before we go out and buy replacements, there's one thing that we could possibly try, a stab in the dark, and that is re-oiling. Just like anything with moving parts, the bearings in fans can sometimes dry out, and if this happens you can be left with sluggish and inefficient fans, which is detrimental to the cooling of your components, which in turn will generate more heat, which can be even more detrimental to the fan. It's a vicious little cycle. So on some fans you can simply pull off the sticker on the back of the fan, which will reveal a little port. You can unplug that and add a few drops of sewing machine oil, or even in worst case, motor oil, to replenish any that's been lost over time. These fans however, They don't have a port, but you can still separate the fans and you can see the mechanism inside, and right enough, it was bone dry. So in here I've added a tiny little bit of motor oil just to see if it works, and put everything back together. Now you're going to know fairly quickly if it's made a difference. Here the difference is noticeable, with the fan that was spinning feeling even smoother, but the fan that wasn't spinning, well, it's the same story as before. It tries and it tries, but it just doesn't kick in. Thankfully though, for a pretty cheap price, you can get replacement fans on somewhere like AliExpress, shipped over to the UK in a couple of weeks. Not quite the quick refurbishment job I'd hoped for, but I'll be perfectly honest with you, as soon as I bought this card I had already placed an order for replacement fans. And using the plethora of vouchers and advertised offers that AliExpress pings in your email address, I ended up paying a rather satisfactory £18.72 for a new set of fans delivered. And with the magic of video editing, here they are 10 days later to come from Hong Kong, and these are essentially direct replacements. Now, whether or not they're genuinely the same ones as INNO3D uses, that's up for debate. There is slight differences in the cables, but they should do the job. Now at this point I will say the only gripe that I've got with the INNO3D 1070 is the fact that yes, the fans are easily accessible, but to replace the fans, the whole heatsink assembly needs to be removed again. It would have been really nice to be able to attach the fans with the heatsink in situ, but even with that gripe, it's only a 5-minute job max. So with the new fans on and everything put back together, it's moment of truth time. And with a rather satisfying whoosh, both fans kick into life, temps are cool and in check through a full Firestrike stress test, and the card is actually remarkably silent. And to be perfectly honest with you, I really like the slick, slim look that this INNO3D X2 goes for, and it is impressively low profile for a card housing such a potent GPU. So at the end of this, I can only say that the INNO3D GTX 1070 is an absolute joy to work on overall. It's so simple, slim, and yet with heat spreaders, backplates, it's a really solid product. And it's one that we're definitely going to need to test out fully in a future video. But I think I'm going to leave it there for today, folks. Thanks for sticking around, and I'd love to know if any of you have ever tried re-oiling your fans on your PC, and did it work? I know it's something that I personally hadn't done in well over a decade, so it was a little hack from yesteryear when we would have pretty much done anything to try and quieten down the much smaller and much noisier case fans PC enthusiasts used to use. Also, I'd love to know your thoughts on the GTX 1070 on the used market, especially when it competes so well with the newly released GTX 1660 Ti. For 160 quid plus 20 quid for new fans, I think we've done pretty well here. For now though, take care, and I'll see you all in the comment section down below, and in the next video.